It's fascinating. You say that at one point we thought Venus could be a tropical paradise, but now we know it's our evil twin. Explain.
It's hard to imagine now, but there was once a time when we thought Venus might be a paradise. Astronomers gazing at its shimmering brightness in the night sky dreamed of oceans, of lush jungles hidden beneath those endless clouds. They thought perhaps it was Earth's sister, not just in size but in destiny, a second home for life. But the truth was far crueler. When Michio Kaku stood before an audience, holding in his hands photographs that had been locked away for decades, that old dream of paradise was finally shattered for good. These were not just pictures. They were revelations, pulled from the iron grip of Cold War secrecy, stripped of propaganda, and laid bare before the world. What they showed was not paradise, but something far darker. The images came from a time when nations treated space as a battlefield for pride and dominance. The Soviet Union, racing to outdo the United States, had managed something no one else had achieved before, or since. They had landed machines on the surface of Venus, not once, not twice, but multiple times. And for brief, fragile minutes, those machines survived in a place so hostile it seemed designed to crush and burn every trace of human ambition. They captured the first real photographs from the surface of that planet, and then, almost as quickly as they came, the machines died. Their final breaths were signals across millions of miles of space, images of a world no one had truly seen until then. When Kaku revealed these photographs, the audience fell silent. Grainy, distorted, scarred by the limitations of mid-20th century technology, the pictures were nevertheless raw windows into another world. Not the lush tropics once imagined, but a desolate wasteland, jagged rocks scattered under a sickly yellow sky, cracked ground stretching toward horizons that felt familiar and alien all at once. They were ghostly, almost dreamlike, as though they'd been torn from a science fiction novel of the 1950s. Yet they weren't fiction. They were real, and in their reality lay a profound weight. Unlike the crisp panoramas we now take for granted from Mars rovers, these Venus photos were survivors of a nightmare. Every detail, the rocks, the fractured slabs, even the shadows, was a miracle wrestled from a planet that didn't want to give us anything. To see them again decades later was not to revisit history, but to reopen a wound, to remind us of just how fragile exploration is, how much courage it takes to build a machine destined only to die for knowledge. Think about it. Temperatures hot enough to melt lead, air so thick it pressed down with a force equal to the depths of Earth's oceans, clouds that rained acid, and yet against all odds, humanity reached out across the void, set machines upon that inferno, and received from them a handful of final whispers. These photographs were their legacy, their last testament. To hold them, even years later, was to hold the last heartbeat of explorers that had no chance of coming home. But there was something else within these images, something unsettling. They didn't just show a distant alien world. They showed what could have been ours. Venus is often called Earth's twin, same size, same rocky body, same beginnings. But where Earth blossomed into life, Venus spiraled into ruin. A runaway greenhouse effect turned it into a furnace. The landscapes in those photos are what happens when a planet's balance is broken. Jagged boulders, fractured ground, oppressive skies. This is what waits at the end of planetary destiny gone wrong. Looking at them, you don't just wonder about Venus. You wonder about Earth, about how thin the line truly is between paradise and hell. That is why Kaku's reveal was so powerful. He didn't present these photographs as relics of Cold War rivalry or as curiosities for scientists alone. He held them up as mirrors, mirrors of our courage, our ambition, our fragility, and perhaps even of our future. In those faded, surreal images, we are forced to see not just Venus, but ourselves. The audience sat frozen as Kaku spoke, and for good reason. It wasn't just the photographs themselves that carried weight. It was what they represented. Each image was a fragment of time, a fleeting moment captured by machines that had been built to do something almost impossible, to live, however briefly, on a planet that wanted nothing more than to erase them. The Soviets had called these landers Venera, a name drawn from the goddess of love, yet their fate was anything but tender. They descended through clouds as thick as stone, battered by hurricane winds, scorched by unimaginable heat, and still they managed to open their mechanical eyes. They looked upon Venus, and through them, so did we. Those eyes didn't stay open long. The longest survivor lasted just over 2 hours. 2 hours, that was all the time they had to tell us their story. And what a story it was. Each frame transmitted back across the cosmic gulf was filled with a kind of loneliness no human has ever experienced. You could almost feel it in the rocks, in the emptiness of the horizon, in the oppressive glow that seemed to crush the very sky. These weren't just pictures of a landscape. They were photographs of silence. Silence so heavy it almost screamed. When Kaku revealed them decades later, it was as if the voices of those dead machines had been resurrected. Voices we had ignored, voices that had been hidden away in archives, dusted off only for scientists who could bear to look at them without flinching. But this time, the world got to see. The world had to see. For in those pictures lay not just scientific data, but a reminder of something much more profound: the cost of forgetting. Because you see, Venus wasn't always this way. Billions of years ago, it might have had oceans. It might have known rain that nourished, not rain that burned. It might even have had landscapes not unlike Earth's. But then, something shifted. The planet tipped into chaos. Heat built up, the seas boiled away, and the atmosphere thickened into poison. What remained was a world that looked alive from afar, but was, in truth, utterly dead. As Kaku spoke, the haunting beauty of these images took on a sharper edge. He wasn't just showing a ruined planet, he was warning us. For the tragedy of Venus is not simply that it burned. The tragedy is that it could have been us. The photographs were like a cautionary tale written in stone. Those jagged slabs, those fractured plains, they were echoes of a planet that had once walked the same path Earth is on now. And that's what made them terrifying. They weren't just windows into an alien world. They were windows into a possible future, one we might still stumble into if we aren't careful. The audience didn't need Kaku to spell it out. The message was written in the pictures themselves. Every cracked rock seemed to whisper, "This is what happens when a world loses its balance." Every shadow seemed to say, "This is the cost of ignoring the warning signs." For Venus, it was carbon dioxide spiraling out of control, a runaway greenhouse effect that never stopped. For us, well, the parallels are uncomfortably close. And yet there was also something deeply moving about these images. They were not only symbols of warning, but of courage. To know that human beings, locked in a race for power, still reached across millions of miles to land cameras on this world of fire. It speaks to a defiance in our species that is hard to ignore. A defiance that says, even if the odds are impossible, we will try anyway. The landers died quickly, yes, but they died doing something extraordinary, showing us the truth. As the audience stared at those photographs, they weren't just looking at Venus. They were looking at humanity's own reflection. Fragile, brave, desperate for answers, even when the answers might hurt. And maybe, just maybe in that reflection was a chance, not just to understand Venus, but to ensure we don't share its fate. The final photograph lingered on the screen far longer than the rest. A barren horizon, rocks scattered like the bones of a dead world. The sky painted in a suffocating orange haze. No clouds, no blue, no movement. Just stillness. Just silence. The room was quiet, almost reverent, as if the audience was staring at the grave of a long-lost civilization. And in a way they were. Venus itself had become a kind of tomb, of oceans that once might have shimmered, of skies that might once have carried rain, of a world that might have breathed. But that breath was choked, the lungs of the planet filled with fire until nothing remained but heat and stone. Kaku let that silence hang, because silence has a way of speaking louder than words. Then he asked a question that made the air itself feel heavier. What if this is our future? It wasn't just a question about climate, or science, or politics. It was about existence itself. Humanity has always imagined the end of the world as something sudden, a flash, an explosion, a war. But Venus tells a different story. Its end was not fast. It was slow, relentless, a creeping transformation that happened layer by layer, year by year, until there was no turning back. A story not of a sudden death, but of a long, inevitable suffocation. And that's why these photographs matter. Because they don't just show us another world. They show us a mirror that doesn't flatter, a mirror that reflects not what we are today, but what we could become. The rocks in those images will never move. The sky will never clear. Venus is beyond saving, but Earth is not. At least not yet. That's the haunting gift these landers gave us in their final moments, the gift of foresight. 2 hours of survival, 2 hours of breathless transmissions through a storm of death. And in those 2 hours, they delivered a warning strong enough to echo across generations. Kaku's voice softened as he reminded everyone of this truth. The Venera landers, built in secrecy during a bitter rivalry, had unknowingly left behind something timeless. They hadn't just given us pictures of another planet, they had given us a choice. The choice to learn from Venus or to ignore it, to see the skeleton of a world and recognize our reflection, or to turn away. And perhaps that is why these images feel so heavy. Because when we look at them, we know deep down that we are not looking at something distant and alien. We are looking at a warning written in stone, a message carved into the face of a world that died long before us. The photographs are haunting, yes, but they are also sacred. Sacred because they are rare. Sacred because they were earned at the cost of machines that braved a hell no living thing could endure. Sacred because they may yet be the only reason we choose a different path. When the screen finally went dark, the audience didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They sat in silence, their faces pale, their eyes distant. Because sometimes the greatest discoveries are not the ones that thrill us. Sometimes they are the ones that terrify us. And Venus terrifies us, not because it is different, but because it is the same. Those photographs will never change. Venus will never change. But we can. That, perhaps, is the greatest lesson hidden in those final images of a world swallowed by fire. The machines that landed there are gone. The planet they revealed is silent, but their message still lives, carried not in their metal remains, but in the hearts of those who dared to look upon their final gift. And maybe, just maybe, that gift will be enough.